Hello, I'm Rosie Hardy. This is Rosie Hardy Gardening, and we're in November Q&A, so let's get on with it. Can you please explain what is meant when watering instructions are given in inches? For example, water such and such plant 1 inch per week. Well, this sounds like something that is on an American website or something like that, because I have never heard of watering by the inch. Basically, I would say it's much more useful for the average gardener if you give them a volume, i.e. give your plants a pint of water a week or something like that. Preferably make sure that if you've got something which is in a small pot, so say the size of my mug here, you're not going to put that amount of water into that size of pot. So you are only going to be using a small amount, and you have to work it out, I'm afraid, per plant. But the answer is do not overwater. So I'm assuming what they are thinking is that you are taking and you are using a measure of the same amount and you're using just an inch of water out of that measure. But if it is this wide a measure and you're using an inch, that is 3 times the amount of water as to something this and you're using an inch of it. So it's better if it's done volumetrically, i.e. millilitres or half a pint or a pint per plant that you're doing. I hope that helps. Hi Rosie, my spring bulbs are in the ground, are confused, already starting to sprout. Yes, I know we've had some warm weather, then it's gone a bit cooler, then it's got warmer. Don't worry too much. Bulbs will always, once they hit cold weather, they will then stop growing and go down. Yes, it might be advisable to put a little bit of mulch over the top so that the top pieces are not going to get really badly frosted. It may be that those plants are actually just a little bit too high in the ground and weren't planted deep enough, but don't worry, they are absolutely fine. Your Gora as well, if it's got good basal growth, that is wonderful, but still leave the top growth there to protect that growth that's at the base. It's really good to see on Gora, Oenothera as they are now, with good basal growth. That is fantastic for the new year coming along. I planted a hardy hibiscus in September, lost all its leaves. Late October it is now starting to put on new leaf. Will it be okay? It should be fine. Just be aware if you've got some really hard frosts and those new leaves have not fallen, just put a bit of horticultural fleece over the top of it, but it should be perfectly fine. Sometimes when they do this little bit of new growth, it may just mean in the spring they're later into growing, but otherwise they should be fine. Thank you, Rosie. The problem is I would like to identify a plant by a photograph. So this lady has emailed in a photo, absolutely fine. And she is asking whether the photo is a plant that she bought online, was supposed to be Rudbeckia goldstem, and looking at the leaf, it looks a little bit wrong. Now, the leaf, some of the leaf is slightly older on the plant, some is newer, so it looks slightly wavy edge. Occasionally Rudbeckia can do that, but I would say that it looks more like a campanula than it does the Rudbeckia that it is meant to be. But until it puts on new, fresh spring growth, and then starts putting on flower, it's going to be difficult to determine because older, later growth is not that easy to tell what it is. Somebody's saying heuchera is the mainstay of their garden, got about 3 dozen of them, and was wondering if the cutting back that I do and show on one of the heuchera videos, is that what should always be done when you're repotting? And it is something that we do as of course, because it just is so much easier for repotting a plant to tidy it up, get rid of all the old leaf, allow the new leaf to come through, because you're repotting it, it needs to regenerate. However, if you're repotting it in the middle of the summer, you're unlikely to want to do as much of a dead leaf as we do when we're doing an autumn or an early spring pot. Let's see what else we've got here. So I've got some cuttings of Salvia caradonna and Perovskia, Pulmonia, Achillea nepeta, all herbaceous stuff. Don't have greenhouse, in the utility room, faces south, been supplementing with LED lighting. Is this a good idea or should I let them die back? My own opinion on this is they are herbaceous perennials. They should have a rest period. Stop the LED lights. allow them to have a drying out, let them go dormant, and then allow them to come back in the spring. Keeping them going right the way through the winter months is not a good idea. They need that rest. Let them have some dormancy. I'm struggling to find a low-growing perennial for the front of the border that can survive part shade and dryish soil. There is a tree canopy. It's from the neighbour, so it's not the roots that are causing that problem. Okay, so small to medium, that's different in everybody's ideas, but just a few general ideas of what you could use. Epimediums, Brunnera, Disperopsis, Amsonia, and Dicentra. Now I mean Dicentra, not Lamprocapnos, two different types of plants there. All of those should work in those conditions. Do try them. Hello Rosie. A lot of this is regarding whether or not I do a video, and thank you very much for the suggestion. It's about using plants in containers for on a deck, etc., and needing a little bit more ideas as to what to put into those plants that we've got. Used hardy geraniums, used oreganos, and used salvia diane. So my thing on this is to just give you a couple of ideas. Salvias are always good. There are lots and lots of different types of salvias there. There are the half hardy ones, so the ones which are sub-shrubby. So something like Salvia amistad is always brilliant. The Gregii types are fantastic, but also some of the more herbaceous types, so something like the Salvia nemorosa types. There are some really good ones there. Crystal blue is really good. That one reblooms. Erodium maniscaui instead of using a hardy geranium. Carex, grasses, they're always useful. Okay, thank you for that question. What medium-sized evergreen shrub, perhaps with berries, not important, would you recommend to put in a border at the front door? Now, I haven't said whether your front door area is sunny or not, but anyway, here are a few that would be quite good, which will be medium height, either have flower or some berries. So Camellia, Pieris, Pyracantha cochineal red cushion, that one is a dwarf one, really, really good form, and Mahonias, they're lovely. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. Hi, can I plant Crocus muscuri, hyacinth and or allium in my big containers? They are 40 to 50 centimetre pots. They've already got roses in them and dahlias. They've been in there for 2 to 3 years. And would the spring bulbs grow in there? Spring bulbs would definitely grow in there. You can put probably the Crocus muscari and maybe the hyacinth in with the roses and the dahlias, but be aware that you'll have a lot of root growth there from the plants that are already in those containers. The smaller bulbs, such as the crocus and the muscari, would be fine because you can dot those in, you can just make a hole and push them in, and they don't need to go down too low, so they would work. Otherwise, I would suggest putting them all into other containers and then just perhaps dotting those around. Maybe put some upturned pots and put them so they look as though they're in with your roses, etc. That might be a way of doing it. This is one about evening primrose, Ornothera. Should I move the self-seedlings now or should I wait until the spring? If there is no risk of frost, then absolutely you can pick those seedlings out and you can move them around. Otherwise, I would wait until the spring and lift them and move them to where you want them to go. This is someone who is in zone 8B and wants to know whether they should cut off the spent leaves and spent flowers off shrubs and plants because the weather has been very weird in Surrey, BC, and there are still flowers, etc. on these things. Now, I would say that as soon as you get a frost, you are going to see that the leaves are going to go black and they will fall off themselves anyway. The heads will either look reasonable or not look too good. If you know you're going to get a huge amount of snow, then you may be wanting to reduce the height of those shrubs. You may already have got to that stage, I don't know. But I'm of the opinion that in nature, things don't get pruned back. So we should leave them there and allow nature to do what it does. Leaving growth up will make the plant secure at the bottom. Sometimes if things are too high and they get too much weight of snow on them, they can go over and split, in which case a pruning back can be advisable. It really depends on how tidy you need to be, but think about how plants grow in nature, what prunes them off, and it is nature itself that prunes things down. Okay, I have a Tutson. I had to actually look that up because I hadn't heard of that common name before, but it actually is for Hypericum or St. John's wort. So they don't know what type it is. It's not very big, only about 50 centimetres, and it's growing in a sort of prostrate way. They've seen a lot in the neighbourhood which are much taller varieties, much more upright, and is wondering how to prune it to make theirs become the more upright. Well, I'm sorry to say, but because there are so many different forms, and some are low mounding forms and some are taller forms, yours is probably just naturally a low mounding one, and so no amount of pruning or supporting it is going to change the shape of it. What you need to do is ask someone who has got a bit of the taller one, get a cutting from that and then plant that in your garden, and that one will go up and you will have a much taller variety. I think your variety is the small mounding forms. How do you overwinter tender bulbs like gingers and cannas? Now these tend to be in the UK not very hardy unless you're in the far south and anywhere else, and I would suggest if you've got them in containers, then you put those into a greenhouse. You can fleece them, bubble wrap them, put them somewhere frost free. That's the first thing. If they're in the ground, however, you will need to be mulching them, and the mulch needs to be quite high, and that can be a straw mulch, it can be anything that you can put over the top just to create a really good helping mound over the top of the crowns of those plants so that they don't get too badly frosted. What should I do with my heavy clay soil, which smaller plants are not developing a good root system? Things planted last autumn have made little or no progress, and I've lost countless plants, and this is in Italy. Right, thank you very much for this question. It really depends on how small the plants were that you were putting in. Were you putting in small, tiny plug plants in the autumn, or were you putting in something that was a 9 centimetre plant? If you were putting in plug plants, then I'm not surprised that they haven't grown out and rooted. Planting those in the autumn into clay is not a good idea. 9 centimetres should have gone out. But the answer is it's your clay soil, and your clay soil is very heavy, very claggy, and plants will not grow out very well if they're planted into it in the autumn. It's far better to plant in the spring. I would also suggest that you need to make your planting holes much bigger. You need to incorporate a good amount of organic matter into those holes and then plant in and give those plants a really good watering before you leave them. They need to be watered well in, and then just check them occasionally through, and I think you will have much better success planting in the spring, planting slightly bigger plants, and also making sure that the hole that you put them into is twice the size, good amount of organic matter put in there as well. How to maintain drainage in a border, not in a pot. For instance, someone's got a lovely border with gorgeous lavender as a row, incorporated masses of grit when they've planted first time, and just thinking that the grit over time will get moved and disappear down into the ground. And it's seen happen with bigger stones. And what are my thoughts on this? My thoughts are that if you have done it with big enough grit, not small, tiny grit, then that will absolutely be fine. You're putting in a variety of lavender called Grosso, which has a good root system, and that root system is going to break up that heavy clay and help with the drainage as well. And the one thing, once you've got plants into ground that is clay, then no amount of putting gravel or anything over the top is going to help with the drainage. What you need is organic matter, lots and lots of organic matter, and it is big, high amounts of mulching of organic matter that the worms take down, and that is far better, because the more organic matter there is in a clay soil, the better it makes it, and it means that the roots go down, and the more root movement you get, the better drainage you get within that soil. Right, this is another one. This person has had sawfly decimating their roses, doesn't want to spray, so is wondering if there's anything that they can recommend to plant in there to tempt the sawfly away. Well, there aren't really plants that will tempt the sawfly away, but there are plants that will deter them from actually going there. So plants with very strong scented leaves and maybe scented flowers are a deterrent to sawfly. So these are known as accompaniment planting, and things like agastache, really very good. Catmint can be good. Tagetes, not necessarily the small ones, but some of the taller growing tagetes are really good for that sort of area. Scented pelargoniums, and I know they're only annuals, but scented pelargoniums, so the ones which have got the really scented leaves, they're good. And feverfew, all of those are really good to grow in amongst your roses or anything that's getting sawfly, because it will deter those insects from going in there. Hope that really helps you. Thank you very much for watching.